Hello and welcome everyone to the Grand Multiliteracy event. So it's an event where researchers and practitioners come together to talk about multilingual literacy. And so every language is different. They all have their own difficulties. And for English, it's the deep orthography. So it means that one sound can be written in different ways, or certain combinations of letters can be read in different ways as well. It's not consistent, which might make things difficult. And so to talk about this, I'm very happy to have Raquel Aliste with us, who is a former early years foundation stage coordinator, and who is going to go through this because I think as parents, first, if we want to teach our children English, it might be tricky to think, where do I start? How do I do it? And also for families like mine, where we live in England, for example, our children go to an English school, and we want to teach them our language. We might be wondering how they do it in school. So, by being informed, we are able to leverage what they do in school and reinforce things at home with our own languages. And also, Raquel is offering her book, which is called Party Plasty, as part of the giveaway. We're going to talk about it. Yes, this one. We're going to talk about it by the end of this interview. Yeah, so welcome, Raquel, and thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you to you to actually invite me. It's actually an honor to be able to be part of this event. So thank you so much for counting with me.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you here as well. So thank you. Do you want to add anything to the short introduction I've made of you? Ah, yeah, your company. I forgot to mention your company as well.
Oh,
What do you
yes,
do?
well, it's fine, don't worry. Well, I'm Raquel, I'm the founder of Spanglish Easy. And yes, what we do really in kind of like in the bilingualism world is just trying to help Spanish speakers to actually be able to speak Spanish and English with their children, because we feel like as the Hispanic culture, it's a little bit tricky for us to actually learn that second language, that English language. And in my case, particularly, I was not good at all with English. And then I actually came to England. I learned how they learn English. And then suddenly, oh, I actually speak well, and I actually can pronounce, and I can even learn the grammar in a completely different way. So there's a way of actually for all of us to learn English the right way. And that's a little bit what I do at the moment with Spanish families or with the Spanish speaking families. And on the other side as well, of course, yes, I am a teacher here in the UK. To be precise, I am near Leeds. So yeah, I do go to different schools at the moment, and then I just help them with the early years profiles, and of course with phonics as well. And yes, it's been actually, I don't know, a pleasure being able to learn all these different tricks and different ways of learning literacy and of course English, because it's been able to actually teach me properly how to teach it and how to learn it, and then on the other hand was helping me to actually be able to share all this knowledge with others.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Because yeah, I think there are some, like you said, there are lots of tricks, etc. But it's true that there are things we can do that can harm the learning and others that can improve it. So it's good to know how to do things. Especially, for example, with English, when it's deep orthography, it might be tricky to think, where do I start? So it's great to have you here. And and so I would like to start with a question on so how to start. Because literacy learning doesn't start when you put a pen in a child's between the child's fingers. It starts a lot before. Can you describe or maybe explain to parents what you do in school to prepare a child to start on the literacy journey?
Of course, I think that precisely, or what we tend to do here in England, and what I recommend
Yeah.
my clients and my students, is that really everything, it starts by communicating with the child. So then everything is by giving them an example, by kind of playing with them and everything, and more at the beginning of their years, when they are babies, when they are still toddlers, when they are still young infants. The most important thing is just really communicate with them, talk to them, and play with them. And through that play, you will start teaching them lots of different skills and lots of different learning that they will not call learning, or we will not call learning, but in reality it is. So for example, one of the most important things that I don't think that people realize is that we need to have strong muscles in our hands. So we need to be able to actually have those muscles developed in our hands. So then later on, we can actually hold a pencil and then able, of course, to write down with them. But again, just because it's part of what we do when we are babies, what we do when we are toddlers, that type of activities, we don't think they are going to be that important in the future. And actually, there's many studies, and I precisely love one from the BBC that I'm more than happy to share with you, in which they say that surgeons nowadays, their muscles in their hands are not as developed as they were 20 years ago.
Oh.
And they think it's because of mobile phones, of
Because we don't
and like
write
kind of
as
like,
much.
yes, consoles, because we don't write as much, and then also because the fine motor skills that we used to do in early years are starting to disappear little by little. And on the other hand, we are asking children to start learning to write earlier and earlier. So then that makes a massive difference of what a 3-year-old 10, 15, 20 years ago used to do and what 3-year-olds do now. And I think that that is so important that we teach the children to how to play with their hands and how to start using them more. So then actually when they are ready, they'll be able to hold that pencil better. And of course, not just pencil, but all the different tools that we will need to do for writing and of course for reading as well.
So the
So
sorry.
no, go for it.
I was going to ask, is it like, for example, playing with Play-Doh? Because I can see that this demands a lot of muscles, or can it be just finger painting or
All of that, precisely all of that. Just as simple as having rice on a table and then asking the children to actually get it with their 2 fingers, because they are learning how
ah,
to actually get those 2 fingers together, the pinch movement, and then they will learn how to control those fingers, and then just getting the pasta, just getting the rice, just getting the spaghetti. Then why not, for example, having like a very long spaghetti, a hard one, and then getting maybe some beads or some pasta, and then just trying to put them inside. And again, in those things, you don't think about it, but you are really using all the different muscles from your hand. And of course, yes, Play-Doh is one of those things that the children will just love constantly. But it's not the only thing, is what you are saying, painting. Painting on a table, painting. One of the things that I love with the children, because they do use other type of muscles in their hands, is actually painting, but underneath a table. So what I do is that I take the paper actually under a table and I ask them to be Da Vinci and to be in the Sixth Chapel and then actually be drawing and be painting underneath the table, and just kind of like you have a completely different situation of how you will paint. And then of course you've got your easels, well, you will paint like this. So it's just about trying to do things in a different way that require your hands. And then that can be cooking at home. That can be playing in the sand, in the playground. That can be just actually going to the park and going to the swing or to the slide. It can be absolutely anything. It can just be throwing rocks in the river. Literally, that I don't know
that's
how it's
true.
called in other countries, and actually I don't remember how it's called in English, but I remember in Spain we try to get like very flat pebbles and then we'll
Yeah,
try to make them jump in the river. That
yeah.
type of thing, we are not really learning how to do it. Or maybe with the marbles, like trying to flick those marbles and actually having that movement. Again, I needed to teach my children how to do that movement because they've not been able to play with the bottle caps or with the marbles as such. They do have a marble run, but they don't know how to flick it. So there's lots of movements that we used to have very inside our play. But
Yeah,
unfortunately, our children are not having that time, or they are not having that people teaching them how to do it. And I think a big part of it is a school, because schools are becoming more and more knowledge centered, and we are actually asking the children to start learning how to read and how to write far earlier than when we did some few years ago. And I think that that
wow.
is, I'm not going to say negative, but it's not positive either, because you are taking away that playtime, but that learning skills that comes alongside it.
Yeah,
And because of that reason, children are really struggling nowadays. And as a teacher, I do find my children coming with me with very low levels of hand skills, and then they are not able to hold a pencil correctly. So we need to literally scratch all the things that we do with them related writing, because we need to do all the basic
Ah,
stages first. So
yeah.
it's very interesting, but then on the other hand, it's actually quite worrying as well, because you want to be able to teach your children the best way possible, but you're realizing how the massive gaps that are happening in our
Yeah.
new generations, really.
Yeah, and as teachers, like we need to follow government guidance. But if there was no government or we're in another country, what at what age do you think it's good to start? So there are lots of things we can do before to prepare the muscles, etc. But to get to the stage where they have a pen in their hand, around what age would you say is better?
Can I tell you the truth?
Mhm.
I don't think that there is ever the right age. I think that
Okay.
everything depends on the child. And I think
Yeah.
that precisely as teachers, and there's many methodologies like Montessori and things like that that do follow that. And I think
Yeah.
that as parents, we might be able to actually offer our children precisely those skills in the right moment. So girls, for example, not saying all of them, but they tend to prefer to use pencils and coloring pencils and maybe crayons on an
Yeah.
early age that maybe boys do. But for example, we can actually encourage boys to get sticks. And the thing is, we don't really realize, but the stick, if it's actually quite long, I mean, I know this is a pen, but a stick, they can still hold it and they can still do things with them that are basics for holding pencils later. So
Yeah.
I will say in an ideal world, I think that maybe what the northern countries do, like Finland and all of those, that I believe that is around 6, 7 years old. And I think that, yes, again, we need to wait for the child to be ready and to be prepared. And many of them are going to be ready earlier. So why to stop them? And many of them are going to be ready later. So again, why to push them, or why to try to encourage something that is still not there? But if we needed to say an age, I would say approximately, yes, 6, 7 years old.
Okay. Ah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot earlier, yeah, in England because
Completely.
so is it from 4 years old that they start, or is it a bit later, like 5 years old? Around what?
No, they start holding pencils and start writing around 3 years old when they come to
Oh,
nursery. So children
wow, I didn't
normally start
realize.
nursery 3 years old. Yes, and as a nursery teacher, then we need to start teaching them how to write down their name and how to start doing handwriting as such. It's true that depending on the school, they might learn the name earlier, they might learn the name later. There's starting to be different studies that maybe we could go through, in which they say actually you cannot teach a child to write down their name unless that they are learning the phonics. I mean, like the
Yeah.
corresponding sounds with the letters. So there's starting to be lots of new theories really regarding when is the right time to learn how to write their name. But what is true is that we start doing handwriting as such, like for example, doing swells, doing kind of like curves and not that type of thing,
Yeah.
which again, it's actually quite interesting and it's not a bad thing, but not all children are ready to do that, because some of them are still very immature, they are still like kind of like baby-like, and they
Yeah.
need other type of teaching, and they need maybe to hold a ball instead of a pen, because their muscles, again, they are still not ready to hold something very small. They need that play-doh that we are talking about. They need that throw-in that you can do with many objects. They maybe need, instead of a pen that they are so thin, you might maybe need some blocks to actually put ones on top of
Hmm.
another. You might need to play with water. Why not? You need to start filling those jugs and start just spilling them out and
Oh,
start using those sieves. So there's many things that you can actually use where you go from big objects to starting to use less and less and less objects. And even though you are starting to teach them how to write or how to hold a pencil, there's many tools that you can use to teach them without them
mm,
knowing. So it's like that paint. You can use your finger to actually
yeah.
paint on the
Yeah.
paint, or you can use a brush and you can start painting, but you can also use a cotton bud, or you can use a feather like they used in the olden times, but that's a reason because it's a really is the perfect shape of a pen. You can use so many things really, because at the end of the day, writing is just something that makes a mark. So you can make a mark with your nose. Why not? You can make a mark with your foot. And actually, how many people actually are not using their hands to write or to draw, and they are doing wonderful things with their mouths and wonderful things
Yeah.
with their feet. So actually, the handwriting, I think that for our generation is you need to write. And it's like, I think it's starting to change. Handwriting really is the action of making a mark. And it can be a square, it can be a heart, it can be just a simple tally. It can be anything we want. Is those first stages before we start to write what we call
Okay.
handwriting as such.
Thank you. I guess that's really reassuring to parents to know that, but first we can do a lot before, but also we don't need to put a pen in our children's hands too early.
Yes, no, is I think that precisely. We tend to be as parents. I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, and I think that yeah, you always want your children to do the best and be the best one at school and all of that. And I think that we put an awful lot of pressure on ourselves. And I do remember during COVID, I wanted to do lots of stuff with my own children. And then, yeah, because they need to go back to school and they need to be ready. And it's like, yes, but then
Mhm.
they also need to be children and you also need to
Yeah.
play with them and you need to show them all those basic skills that at the end of the day, those basic skills are going to be the ones that will help those more developed skills later. So without
Yeah.
that basic play of water in the bath, that basic cooking of kind of like holding the different bowls that you are going to use, or that whisk, or washing dishes, why not? All of those
Yeah.
things are actually really going to help for those muscles to develop, and then of course to the right later, and for plenty more activities and knowledge that will come along. But yes, the tiniest little thing that we do with them at home will be actually a massive help in the future.
Okay. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you about something that I've seen my children do in school, because I wasn't in the classroom, but I could bring them to the classroom. And it's when they were arriving. So I think they were when they were 4 years old, maybe three, I can't remember, about around four. There was a table just outside the
Mhm,
classroom, and a board, and they had to take their own to find their picture. So there was a picture, and I think first there was just a picture. They had to put it on the board to say that they were present. And later on, after a few weeks or months, I think, so there was the name as well. Maybe there was the name from the beginning, I can't remember, but they had to find themselves and put
mhm.
it on the board. And after a while, it was just their name and they had to put it on the board. So it was finding their names amongst all the names. So maybe finding like what uh, recognizing their names more than being able to write, etc. But I thought it's a nice way to familiarize a child with writing, reading, before they actually do it. And I was wondering, so if you could share with us some habits, routines you have in class to build up over time certain skills.
Yes, I think that, yes, one of the things that we are, again, I think that doing lately that are working really, really well is having examples of absolutely everything that we want our children to do. So precisely, for example, with the names, that's a basic one that we are doing, and is we do normally use it for the register as such.
Yeah.
So we will have initially, as you say, for the children that do not recognize their names straight away, just because they might not be able to learn them at home. Or again, we do not expect the children to learn them at home, but we know that many of them will and will have actually learned how to write it down and all of that. So we need to cater for every skill really that come to school. So then initially, when the children are 3 years old, we normally understand that they might not be able to recognize it. So then we include one of their photographs, and sometimes we might include as well like an object or something like that. They might get
An
like an
animal or
animal. So
yeah.
then someone might be a lion, a hippopotamus. So then it's something that they will get very attached with. They might paint and color themselves. So then they know is
Ah,
theirs. And then we just want to make that link between the child and actually their name. So then they start little by little recognizing it. And as you say, yes, once that they find the photograph, then is the photograph with the name, and then we take away the photograph, and then it's just their name. So then little by little they start recognizing their name as such. And by the end of nursery, what I tend to do is that then, instead of having the name very clear on a piece of paper, we actually use lollipop sticks, like the ones from the ice creams.
Yeah.
And what I do is that I write down their name on them. So then what they do is that they use them, and then we tend to vote with them. So then the first thing is that they need to find their name, again, in a very small lettering. Normally it's handwriting, so it's a different type of print. So then it's not just the one that we've got nicely from the computer, it's a different type of print. So it's another level of difficulty, really, because it's not just recognizing your name, but actually recognizing it in a completely different type of writing from someone else. And then the intention is that we start then using those names for different activities. So they might need to go and find the name for doing an activity. So sometimes they need to go and we will have like different activities in different tables. So they will need to get their lollipop with their name and find their other name. So then some children might be looking at numbers. Some children might be doing Play-Doh. Some children might be reading a book. So then they will need to find their name. Another way is that you maybe actually ask them to vote. Like we are very on kind of here in England, we are talking a lot about democracy and the power of the vote and all of those things. So what we tend to do a lot is having like 2 books, and then the children can find that name and then they can vote which book they want to read at the end of the day. So that is again, it seems silly, because yeah, they are reading a book at the end of the day, but yes, you need to think about all the different processes that the children need to go through to actually be able to do that. And precisely that recognition of that word with the name and with that writing is actually something quite tricky. Then we tend to have lots of examples as well with words that we want them to start looking at. Is again, we don't want them necessarily to learn them, but we know that we live in Leeds, so the word Leeds is going to come up everywhere. So we might have actually a map where we've got like the cars and the trucks and all of those things, and then we will have Leeds in big letters. We will have like the different places more common in here, so then they might actually be able to recognize them. We do have McDonald's that type of things. But again, it's about them recognizing, and then once that you will start doing the things that are very common for them and very I don't know, that they really treasure, then you will start building little by little that other language. So it's silly, but with McDonald's, with the 3-year-olds, normally McDonald's, McDonald's, and they start little by little start processing those sounds. They start recognizing those first sounds. We don't teach them as such, but they start kind of having like, oh, McDonald's is like this, but then my name is Maria, but then it's written down like that, but they are both the same sound. So I think that early years is about exposing them to everything can be different, but it still can be the same.
This connection.
So they start making those links. So when then later we start teaching the proper sounds, the proper language, the proper different words, it becomes a little bit easier for them because they've been exposed to all those different prints and different styles and different ways of recognizing words, recognizing objects and the words, and all of that really skills that will be later so important.
Yeah. Okay. It's great because it's loads of things we can also do at home. So for example, with the names, but keeping in mind that we don't need to go straight to the name, but by association. And yeah, so thank you very much.
No, it's fine. And I think that many of us do that. Like when you are starting with a baby with mama, that's kind of like the initial response that you've got with a baby. Oh, let's say mama, let's say papa, let's say dada. You start
so they
saying it like
associate the
that.
name with us.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
We do have that instinct of telling the children, this is how we do things, but then we stop. It feels like then we stop and then we don't really use it in the supermarket when we are going to buy sugar bits or things like that. We don't go and we start processing all those different sounds. No, we do it brilliant for mommy and daddy. But then for many other words that we could continue helping the children to acquire, then we find it more difficult. But yes, at
Okay.
the end of the day, what we do at the school is exactly what we initially did at home, is just a continuation of all that learning.
Ah, okay, yeah. And so another thing that I observed in my children that many wonder why teachers were doing it that way is with the first letters they started to learn. So uh, I think the first letter they started to learn was M or P, like for pirate. But they had a chart with like drawings, etc. But I remember them first saying Maisie, Maisie Mountain or something
Amazing
like this.
mountain, yes.
And the P was like for pirates, something something. Yeah, and so I was wondering at that time. So why did they start with M or P first, not maybe a letter that's with the to do with the children's names or anything like this? Why these letters?
I need to say that what you are talking about is actually a methodology of phonics. That's what we use here in the UK to
Yeah,
teach
yeah, it
the
might be
English
different.
alphabet,
Yeah,
the different sounds, and
yeah.
then how we use those letters, those sounds to make words and to write them down and read them. And I need to say that depending on the methodology, they teach the sounds differently. So you are talking, for example, about one of my favorite ones that is called Read, Write, Ink by Ruth Minskin. I think that she teaches phonics in a wonderful way. I don't think it's perfect, but I think that is really, really nice. And actually, I do have the book with me here because I love it so much. And you might actually
Mm,
remember Fred the frog.
yeah.
It's been so used that everything is broken. But precisely, this lady starts the sounds with MASDT. So then those are the sounds. And I believe that the reason why they start with those is because they are the sounds that we most use in the English language. So the most common one is
Ah,
M as ma'am and that type of thing. Then A, ma'am, dad, and then they go with S and then with D. So I do believe that the reason why is because of how often they come in the English language. So then there will be
okay.
the words that, sorry, the sounds that we use the most. Other methodologies start with the sound S and they go SAT because that way they actually can sound out and read the word sat. So then with read writing, they just wanted to teach them certain sounds. And with other methodologies, they wanted three, and then you're able to read a word straight away. So it's just different way that they
Ah,
do
okay.
it. But the main idea is that they use the sounds that are more used in English. So then
Yeah.
once that you will start learning those basic sounds, those first five sounds, you are able to start reading certain words as well.
Okay. Ah, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to know as well that it's not the same in every single school. There is the same logic, but they might not be doing exactly the same thing in all schools.
Yes, no, there's hundreds of different methodologies. So for example, at the
Oh,
moment, I'm specializing around 10 of them, and there's hundreds more that I'm not even aware of. Just because certain schools like doing their own ones. There's other ones that are very small, maybe in just certain regions and things like that, that they prefer to use them. Of course, language
okay.
in the UK is not the same, and we do pronounce differently, and what they pronounce in London is not the same as what we pronounce here in the north. So then they
Yeah.
also do have the different methodologies as well and the different ways of pronouncing it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's plenty of them. I know that in Spain there tends to be it's everything more related to one or two. But here in the UK we do have hundreds. And I think that
Wow.
somehow is problematic for teachers because you need to learn lots of different methodologies if you change your school and then you change methodologies. But then it actually really gives you a far better understanding of how things work. And then that's why
That's true. Yeah.
you become, I don't know, very attached to language and really understanding the reason why things work. And
Yeah.
I think that that precisely is been what clicked in my head one day after I learned kind of like my first, second one. And it's like, oh, so actually, there's a reason behind all of this. So I think I can help Spanish speakers to actually speak English now because I know that trick. So yes,
Mm,
once that you get to know a few, I think that you understand all the reasoning behind it.
okay. Thank you. And so now I'm going a bit further.
Mhm.
How do we go from an isolated letter to a word? So is it like you said, so we teach, for example, three letters and then we make a word, or is it like we need to recognize letters in certain words? How do we expand from letter to word?
Okay. Yes, it's precisely like that. We start with the simple sound. So, for example, to start with, we will teach the 3-year-olds actually to start recognizing a letter and to be able to say the sound. One of the things that we are trying to really emphasize is that we don't teach the letter names. So, for example, for
Yeah,
the letter A, we don't say this is the A sound. No, that is something that we will learn in the future. We start with the A sound.
yeah.
And I think that's very important because the children learn the alphabet sound, the alphabet song very, very early. But we have stopped
Ah,
doing that, or there's many areas where they have stopped doing that precisely because it's actually quite confusing.
yeah,
Because in England, you have the letter sound and then the sound.
yeah,
But
which is
many
different.
times that letter sound or that letter name is also a sound that they do. So, for
Ah, true,
example, the
yeah,
letter A has got the A sound, but it also has got the A sound, like in acorn. So
yeah.
it's quite confusing for them to know from the very beginning, this is an A, but it's the name, but then it has sound, and it's like, it's too much.
Ah,
So
true, yeah.
we start with the very basic.
Yeah,
A, we don't say A, this is the sound. Ah, this is the sound. This is a sound. This is a sound. And then we start teaching them normally around 3, 4, 5 sounds. And then we start putting them together in the way that we go, for example, at. So we go at, at. And then little by little, we start telling the children how those two letters together, you can start teaching them quicker. So we go at, and then you start finishing the word as such at. I'm trying to do it very, very quickly here, but
yeah,
the
yeah.
process is that we start teaching the children that a sound, sorry, a letter has got a sound, and then actually, if you've got several of them, you can put them together, and then you can actually read the word. So that is called sounding out, where we say all the different sounds, and then we read the word.
Okay. Okay, I have two questions. Um, so okay, the second one, I forgot the first one. Um, what you were saying about art, etc., it's exactly the same in alpha blocks. What do you think of this? Is it a good thing to show our children, or are there some negatives about it?
I mean, I think that there's some negatives, but I think that overall Alpha Blocks is actually quite nice and is the way that we will actually teach many children how to read the sound. So I think that in the background and all of that is really good to kind of like review or to kind of support the learning that we are doing at home. So for my clients, for example, in Spain, because they did struggle to have kind of like native pronunciation and things like that, I will always recommend to use Alpha Blocks. Unfortunately, you cannot really see them outside the UK.
Oh,
So it's a
okay.
little bit tricky. But I think that, yes, it's very beneficial to actually be able to listen to them and to actually learn all the different sounds and all the different letters. It is true that what I'm finding is, again, one of the issues is that then parents tend to go too quickly. So they are learning like 5 sounds at school. And then with the alpha blocks, they are learning, I don't know, 20. And many of them sounds, then they learn them too quickly, and then they don't start really understanding
I
the
see. Yeah,
different positions of the different sounds and how we do them. Because one of the tricky parts of the English language is that when some letters go together, sometimes they actually make a different
yeah,
sound, and that also one
yeah,
letter can have lots of different sounds. So
yeah,
the funny thing is that I think every language or most of the languages actually do this. And with the Spanish families, I precisely say that, like, English is so difficult. Yes, I mean, Spanish as well, because the letter C, for example, has
yeah.
got 3 different sounds. Has got the normal one, then it has got like a strong one, and then actually when you put it with a H, it's got a completely third different sound. So Spanish is not really that different. It's just like
We're used to
100
it.
times more, but the basics are the same. One letter can have one sound. Sometimes that letter can have another sound, and
Yeah,
sometimes you can put that letter with another letter and they make a different sound. So you can teach the children that and they will learn it. They will learn it. They are sponges. We know it. They are sponges. They learn everything so easily if you actually show them those basics. So
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. With alpha blocks is brilliant, but careful of going too quick because you might be exposing the children to sounds that they might not have seen before.
yeah. So it's good as a complement to what they could learn in school or something, but or maybe at home, but it can't be used on its own because it would be too much.
Yes, I mean, if, for example, I did not speak English at all,
Yeah,
I will be happy exposing my children to that because at least it will be a basic one and it will be something that they will kind of like have. I don't
mm,
think that children will learn a lot just by watching alpha blocks by itself. There's
yeah,
also needs to be some work alongside it. But yes, I think that they are very good tool and we use them a lot with magnets and many things. But I think that yes, we need to kind of like use them in an
okay,
appropriate way. But again, it's with everything really, with iPads and with everything that we do. So yes, I think that is better to complement with.
okay. Thank you. And I remember the second question I had is I remembered my sons doing gestures when they were saying, yeah, ah or per, like, with the hand. I can't remember what it was. Are you familiar with this or not? Like, I can't remember. So
It's
it's,
okay. Yes, that is actually another methodology. I'm actually quite surprised that your children were using it because read writing, the methodology that you mentioned before, what they
yeah,
do is that they've got like a little poem or like a little sentence that they
yeah,
use to
yeah,
write down the letters. So, for example, like you said, Macy Mountain Mountain is a
yeah,
person. Okay, it's Macy because it's the stick, and then it goes Mountain Mountain because it's kind of like the curves. So
yeah,
then with that sentence, they learn how to write down the letter. So then it helps them in the future. Initially,
yeah,
they don't learn how to hold a pencil. They just kind of learn with their
yeah, they
hands
go
and we
over
use our
it.
magic
Yeah.
fingers. Yes, to do all of those ones. But there is another methodology that is called Jolly Phonics, that they have some
Ah, I've
sounds,
heard the
some
name. Yeah,
songs.
yeah,
Yes. And with them ones, you do have certain symbols or you have certain actions that go alongside that song. And I do believe that, for example, those symbols, those actions that you do with those songs are actually quite important because when I've been correcting children, like how to write down a word, for example, cat, instead of writing down the word cat with C, they were doing it with K. I would kind
yeah,
of like doing like the symbol, and then the children were looking at me without saying, oh, the teacher is telling me or not. But oh, yes, I realize about that. So they are somehow independently, even though you are doing it for them, because you are not talking to them, you are not correcting them, they're kind of seeing it. And then, oh, actually, yeah, this word is not written down like this. I'm going to change it because we need to do it differently. So those actually symbols, I think that they are actually quite good at the time of learning phonics.
yeah. And I know that when I teach, so I teach secondary school, Spanish and French, and we do mimes as well to help them remember some words. And sometimes just by doing the gesture, then okay, they can say the whole sentence because that was the bit that was missing, and or they can start the sentence because they remember.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
And
much easier. It is much easier for children.
yeah. So I'm going to give you a few topics that are probably very broad, and to ask your opinion. So feel free to talk about only certain aspects if you want,
Mhm.
not everything if you don't want. Like, we can't talk about everything, but
I wish.
um, so what's your opinion on handwriting exercises?
I think that again, depending. So I think that handwriting exercises are good. Once that the children have got those skills and then they have developed those muscles in their hands. And I think that, yes, somehow at the end of the day, it's a tricky one because society wants to be
Yeah,
able to read your children's handwriting and then again adults and then whenever they are going somewhere. But then somehow my own child, his handwriting is not amazing. And yes, I'm encouraging him to trying to be more careful when writing things, but then at the end of the day, it's not a skill that nowadays is going to be that important in the future. And I think that as long as you can understand more or less what he's writing, I don't think that is as basic as it was, again, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because now with iPads, with telephones, and we do need to know how to write down, but I don't think it's as
Yeah.
important. But again, everything is going to depend a little bit on the school, on the parents, on how they want to develop. It needs to be clear, it needs to be readable, but I'm not in the older school of, oh, it needs to be perfect. They all need to have the same size. They all need to go in the same line. I think that I'm far from that now, just because of seeing how the children are developing. I think that I prefer focusing on other areas than that handwriting as such, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, another question, it's on mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's mainly because I've seen, so with my sons, when I could see their books from school, often I would see that unless it was like a spelling test, the teachers wouldn't correct the spelling mistakes. So is that something that's widespread in England? And what's the logic behind it?
I think that's a wonderful question. And again, is something that I find continuously with my clients and with my students, because particularly, again, I'm talking from the countries that I know in South America, in the speaking Spanish countries like in Spain, when we teach English, we teach children to learn straight away how to spell a word. But
Mm.
here in England, we don't. So the logic behind it is that we want the children to sound it correctly. So then, as long as the sounds are correct
Yeah,
or it makes sense, the word is not wrong. So it's what we said before with the word cat.
yeah,
Cat, the sound is k, at, cat is three sounds. But in the English sound or in the English language, the k sound has got two letters to write it down.
yeah.
It has got the C or it has got the K. So
Okay.
if a child writes down the word cat with a K, I will say is correct. Of course, if maybe does it in, I don't know, in year six, I will say no. But when they are
Mm.
learning how to write in those early years, in year one, is very basic because they are learning all those different sounds. And it's
Mm.
maybe just once that they've learned it a few times, like they've been using it repeatedly, and then it becomes a word that they will use a lot in their writing, is when I will say, okay, then this word we need to learn how to write it down now with C because is the way of doing it. But again, I think that it needs to be a word that is being used quite a lot for them
Yeah,
to really understand, yes, this
okay.
is the right way of writing it down. Now I need to put a little bit more effort on remembering is a C, is not a K. So I think that here in England, one of the things that we do a lot is we talk about high frequency words. That
Yeah.
high frequency words is the words that we use a lot in the English language. And depending on the year group, we will learn easier ones or more difficult ones.
Yeah.
So those are the perfect ones to know which type of words we should be correcting. So for example, cat will
Yeah.
be a high
Okay.
frequency word in year one and year two. So then you expect a year one and a year two to start learning how to write down correctly
Mm.
that. But for example,
Okay.
school, no, is a tricky one that they will be learning kind of like at the end of year two, if I'm not wrong. I'm talking a little bit on top of my head. I do not know them
Yeah.
by heart,
Yeah.
but there's certain words that you will little by little start learning how to write. And one of the most funny ones is the word vegetable, that in Spain, actually, they ask the children in year one to write down correctly. Vegetable,
Ah,
muscle, because it's science, because it's something. But here, for example, vegetable is a very tricky word that we will
yeah.
not ask children to write down correctly, maybe until year four, something like that, year five even. And there in Spain is something that they need to know straight away because they are learning all the different letters alongside
Yeah.
how to pronounce it. So
Okay.
yes, I think that in England we are doing it wonderfully. We are taking that spelling out and we are just focusing on the children to write down the sounds correctly, and then bring little by little the spelling once that they have really achieved that knowledge and they have really just implemented it.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very helpful to know. Um, I wanted to, because we have 15 minutes, so I want to keep some time to talk about your books. Just before we talk about your books, is there any common mistakes you see parents do that you would like to tell them to be careful about, or any
Yes, I think
mistake?
that maybe, I think that one of the most important things that I see is that somehow, as parents, we try to, how can I explain it? We try to really push the children to go a little bit quicker than they should. And I think that sometimes we just need to put the brake and just trying to go alongside our children. And that particularly might be at the same time as we are learning phonics or we are reading. I think it's actually very important that we pay attention to what the children are doing, because if we are trying to go too quickly, then we might actually do more wrong than we do right. So if our children are learning the basic sounds, it's wonderful that we are supporting them, but maybe not trying to teach them different sounds. Apart from that, trying to read words that are too complicated. There's many ways that we can read, that we can write, that we can put in practice what the children are learning at school, and we can support them in lots of different ways without really raising that knowledge more. And one very simple way, for example, is it always comes to me how to do it with maths.
Yeah.
So we think that adding difficulty is teaching the children higher numbers. So if they know how to add
Uh,
numbers from 1 to 10, then at home we think, oh, they know how to do 1 to 10. That's perfect. It's brilliant. So I'm going to ask them to do numbers up to 20, up to 100. I was like,
yeah.
yes, but what if instead of giving them an addition, numbers to add 1 to 10, why don't you trying to keep the same knowledge but turn it round? So for example, instead of having 1 plus 1 equals what? 2. Why don't you do 1 plus what equals 2? Because it's a
Mm.
completely different way of seeing the picture. The
That's
children there, they don't need to add, they actually need to subtract, and they need to turn it completely. But you are not adding difficulty in the sense of adding more numbers. You are
mm,
turning around the way that they are learning the same concepts that they are learning at school. So that's what I'm talking about when we are at home with that reading. Instead of reading more complicated words, use different fonts, use different ways of writing it down, use different ways
ah,
of reading it. Go maybe on the street and read the plates. Which sounds can you see on those plates? Can you read the magazine? Can you read the different labels, the different letters that are here and there? That very easy words, but read them with a different type of print. So then the children are doing exactly the same, but in a more difficult context. You know what I
okay.
mean?
Yeah.
It's quite tricky because again, we want our children to be the best and we want them to know as much as possible. But sometimes it's not about adding more difficulty, it's just about changing how we do things and just trying to learn the same, but in a
Mm,
different way.
wow. That's a very important lesson to remember. Thank you.
Yes,
Uh,
I think that yeah, we do forget I think that how easy and
yeah.
how simple certain
Yes,
things can be.
because for us, it's easy to go from one font to another. But actually, just because we mastered the language, I know at the beginning when I was learning to read in Korean, I was like on titles on book on with titles on books. Sometimes they use different fonts, and I wouldn't be able to read it properly. I would think it's one letter instead of another, and then she said, "Ah, yeah, it's because normally it's written like this." And even when she leaves me messages in Korean, I say, "Can you write properly?" Because I can't read if she writes too quickly. But yeah, that's a very good thing to remember that the font can change a lot and yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
and there's many different ways of playing really, because again, what we do with our children is playing. What we can do with
Yeah.
them all the time, even when they are 18 years old, we can still play. And there's many places that we can use them. We can use board games. We can use, there's so many video games. There's many things that they can use. My children, for example, now they are really into Nintendo and all of that. So we learn that second language by buying games that are in that language, or we just watch TV with that language, or we go into museums and we just listen to that audio, or we do thematic nights in which we just put maybe one film in one language. We try to do some cooking relating to that country. So there's many
Oh,
ways really
nice.
of going and learning exactly the same thing that you want to promote and play,
Yeah.
but trying to do it in a different way, so then the children really are exposed to all of that. So
Yeah.
yes, it's just maybe sometimes it's just about talking to people like us. It's maybe talking to our communities. And I think that both of us have got like lots of children really that follow us and that are in our communities that have got many ideas. And sometimes I say, I'm not the one with the best ideas. No, it's really by sharing what I think, that someone will share something else and someone else then will just feedback back and then say, oh, actually, I changed that and I did this. Oh, I'm going to do that. And I think that that is what is wonderful about bilingual communities, that we are really sharing all the time. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I think, I don't know how you felt, but when I came here and I started raising my children, I felt a little bit lonely, in the sense of, yes, I had friends, yes, but they did not really share maternity, or they didn't really share what I did with my children in the same way, because I wanted to share
Ah,
them my heritage, my language, but then I
yeah.
wanted to support my husband's ones and their family. So it was trying to balance both. And sometimes it was very different. So actually be able to talk to other people that are going through the same here in the UK, or even in Spain, in Australia, in America, it's amazing. And again, the information is there. It's just about sharing it.
Yeah. And so I would like to, yeah, really keep the time to speak about your book. I think you have a copy with you. We can see it in the background as well.
Yes, sorry. Oh, that way.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got one.
Yeah.
And
So
yes, it's
fun.
actually is what we talked about before. And I think that at the end of the day, as educators, we focus on one topic. In my case, for example, I became obsessed with phonics, and precisely that's what we do in Spanglish Easy. Most of the time is about how to help parents to support that second language with
Yeah.
vocabulary and conversations, but also about how to teach phonics to their children. Because
Yeah.
again, if you're here in the UK, then they will be learning phonics at school, but in many other countries, they don't.
Yeah.
So how can
Mhm.
parents actually use the basic skills of phonics to teach their children the English language? So when I started doing that, then I started seeing my own children, then I started seeing my children at school, and I started realizing about what we talked about, the fine motor skills, and
Yeah.
started realizing how they came to school not knowing how to play, not knowing
Mm.
how to use their hands. And for that reason, I decided what is the thing that they like the most. And is, let's be realistic, is getting
Yeah.
messy and is Play-Doh. So for that reason, I just decided to go for very basics, for something that the children will love, and that is getting their hands messy with Play-Doh. And that is literally the basics of the books that we are creating with Party Plastic. So it's the Spanish English way of saying like a party Play-Doh or Play-Doh
Mm.
party. So children will learn all the different skills in English and in Spanish to actually play with Play-Doh. So it's very basics, but our intentions are to actually start creating more adventures. So we've got a little creature here. It's called Pelocho, and it's our little friend. I don't know if you can see it very well. And then
Yeah.
the intention is that he's going to guide us in all the different skills that we need to learn. So he will actually teach us with his hands how to roll. And then we will have a little description. Oh, sorry, the light is not great. But yeah, we'll
It's
have a
okay.
little
Yeah.
description, both in Spanish or in English, and then we'll have the different words on top. So then you can actually practice with your child. Let's roll the ball, let's roll the Play-Doh, let's pinch the Play-Doh, let's make a ring. And again, that type of vocabulary that not necessarily you might know. And sometimes you just know an awful lot of English, but you don't know the basics, and you
Yeah.
don't know those simple words that your children will need to learn to actually
Yeah.
play and play with Play-Doh. So these books are precisely just for that. So here, how we pass it round around our body, how we make a ring, as we said, how we just pat it. So then we can just see how we do it. So it's very simple, but again, it's nice because the children see the pictures straight away and they learn that basic vocabulary that will again help them in the future.
Yeah. It's all about the skills that you said they need to develop
Mhm.
before we think of putting a pencil in their hands. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
is at the end of the day is just that basic skill, but again, but we somehow feel that we have forgotten. So if we can just help our children a little bit more just by having fun with Play-Doh, why not? Let's go for it.
Yeah. And yeah, just to remind us well that your book is both so you have a version in English, a version in Spanish. So
Mhm.
depending on what people are familiar with, they can choose one or the other.
Yes, of course. Yes.
It
So
works for
yeah.
any language. It's about motor skills. So yeah,
Yes, it doesn't matter really which language you speak. At the end of the day, we all hold a pencil, and at the end of the day, we all need to learn how to strengthen those muscles in our hands. So yes, it's for absolutely everyone that really wants to play with their children and help them in that way.
thank you very much. So we're coming to the end of this interview. Is there one key message you want to share with all the parents watching us?
Yes, I think that at the end of the day, I will say just enjoy this time with them and just trying to find things that you will like as well and that you will enjoy as well. Because I think that many times we put a lot of pressure in, oh, our children is to learn so many things, but we forget that we also are learning with them and that we are also need to enjoy that time. So the more we enjoy the situations with our children, the more we enjoy the games with our children, the more we enjoy those adventures with them, the happier they will be, the happier we will be, and the more we will continue learning. So I think that, yeah, the most important thing is about having fun. So bilingualism is about us being, yeah, don't know, taking that important part and taking that fun as well with us.
Yeah, it's important to remember to have fun along the journey. It can't be hard, otherwise, why would we do it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you very much again. And so we've just talked about little children and the beginning of the journey. The next session is with Amanda Blodgett, and we're going to talk about teenagers. And because I had a lot of questions about how to motivate our teenagers to read and write in their home languages. So if you have teenagers or preteens and you're interested in this, I see you in 15 minutes for the next session. Thank you very much again, Raquel, for being here and for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been wonderful being here with you.
Thank you very much.
See you later. Bye.